I wonder if I can just set you up to start talking. So I've got this one muted, and they can see you. So how about I just let you talk, and then I'll try to turn off what I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess just for a little bit of context, I'm Barry. I'm the senior UX architect on the voice team.
And I am a senior software engineer for the voice team, and we are right by the sports stuff that's filming right now, which is pretty cool. Go on, show them a little bit.
I'll show you where the magic happens.
Yeah. Proper actual sport recording studio.
If you can see that, that's where the BBC Sports team do their updates and filming and studio stuff.
Hopefully.
Which is kind of cool. I don't know if you got that or if it was a bit too shaky, but it's kind of cool. So I guess just to cover Dan's original question, he kind of asked about some of the stuff that we found and how it differs from pre-voice type stuff that we were working on. The main thing that I've found, I don't know if you agree, Emma, is that if you throw enough talented designers and developers at a problem, you can pretty much make a website or an app bend to your will. You can kind of make it do whatever you need it to do. This voice platform or platforms are so immature and so kind of restricted that it's just not like that. And that, from my perspective, communicating that to stakeholders who have got some crazy expectations around kind of all the sci-fi stuff in voice, like holodecks and kind of HAL and all that kind of stuff. It's like, as you alluded to, Dan, we're a long way from that.
One of the challenges we've kind of faced is we have a lot of audio video content at the BBC, and having the appropriate metadata that you can query it without a front-end interface is a massive challenge. On the iPlayer website, there's just tabs with different types of content and episodes. A user can just scroll them and click what they want. How do you surface that content via a transactional voice interface, which is what Alexa kind of is at the moment, is a huge challenge for us. Also, there's no clicking, there's no typing, there's no pressing, there's no gestures.
Yeah.
It's how do people vocalize what they want? People don't know what they want to ask the device is another issue we've found in testing.
Yeah. Ooh. There's a comment there. All right, that's just Dan's comment. Okay, cool. So I guess to rewind a little bit. So we've been working on this platform, this kind of project for about 8 months now?
Yeah, it's probably about June last year, really, that we started.
So essentially, we've obviously it's a shiny new technological kind of broadcasty type platform, and as the BBC, it would be remiss of us not to be on it. But there are a few other kind of business reasons that informed us kind of throwing all this resource at it and trying to make a thing. M&A, our marketing and audiences team, who look after kind of branding and audience research stuff, had been reading a lot of things around voice and the future of voice. And it set a lot of alarm bells off because content attribution is really, really difficult on this platform. There's no logo in the corner. You can't make the logo bigger. So there was an element of what they were proposing was to try and get in there early so that we can kind of own some space and be there as people are starting to define how this all works. There is also a trend in TV viewing, which I'm sure you get in the States, is that younger audiences are watching less and less linear real-time television. It's all kind of Netflix and on-demand streaming stuff. And as a consequence of that, we are struggling to reach some of the younger demographic to the same degree as we used to be. Cool.
I'm trying to read your question.
Yeah, sorry, just bring another pop-up. Can you bring I think it's
that way. There we go.
There we go. We're on the screen. Let's have a look. So the voice UI equivalent of branding and logos. Oh my word. Okay. It is the sting or the ident is essentially kind of what we've got. We started looking at audio tones and audio branding to try and create an auditory language around it. So the thinking was that certain interactions, confirmations would have a similar kind of audio tone to them, the same kind of bing or bong, that kind of stuff. and that whenever you triggered a new piece of content, we would have like an audio, kind of like a jingle, like an old radio station ident kind of thing playing. That sometimes works well, sometimes
yeah,
doesn't.
And it is also the tone of voice in particularly, because obviously we've mostly done stuff on Alexa. So there's a big piece we had around how can we make the device respond in a way that we can't change the voice. Obviously, we all know the Alexa standard voice. So how do we get it in kind of a tone and a context that suits the BBC and its brand? It's kind of another challenge.
Yeah. So we actually worked with a team who've done a lot of stuff for radio and audio branding to help us come up with a tone of voice. The way that's manifested itself currently within the skill that we've got live is just the words we have Alexa saying back to you, and then some audio stings here and there. The Alexa's kind of text-to-speech stuff isn't sophisticated enough to have intonation and stuff like that. You can kind of tell Alexa to say something in a whispery voice or a shouty voice, but to be honest, it's pretty creepy. And it's probably not something you'd want in like an enterprise kind of production level skill. So we're stuck with using similar phrases and kind of repetition of stuff to try and create this concept with people that like they know they're inside the BBC space when they're using our thing. It's fighting against Amazon's original intentions a little bit, to be honest. Was it deemed creepy? Yeah, very much so. We did a little bit of tone of voice on it, and we came up with 2 or 3 different potential personalities, and we came up with one of the entertainer, I think it was called. So brevity is key to everything. The more Alexa says, the more it gets in the way of you getting to your content. So, for example, the confirmation message when you ask for a radio station, the default radio provider on Alexa is TuneIn, and that uses the standard pattern of playing radio station from TuneIn. Because we were conscious that we'd already prefixed that with this audio ident, that we made that as short as possible. So we've truncated that to here's Radio 1, or here's radio station. So we're always trying to make things as short as possible. That's one of the main things. Did we need to hire new or different roles to address metadata problems? We do, but we haven't.
Currently, things that we still need to resolve. We've been working with Amazon, who have kind of given us various solutions. Some aren't in line with our goals, so some of them take too much control away from us. A bit more like kind of Spotify, where the library is accessible via the device. We didn't want that. We wanted to have control over the user journey. And in terms of the actual metadata issues, they aren't fully resolved. We've actually had to use some phonetic matching search systems, not to go into too much detail, that try and kind of bridge the gap temporarily.
Yeah,
can you still hear us?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah, we've ended up with things like the current skill that we have live is our radio and podcast streaming proposition. The podcast content is all produced by editorial teams for lots of different channels. We are just a consumer of that content. So we've been feeding back to some of the teams around the shortcomings in their metadata policies. It's very difficult for us to be able to pull out certain bits of content based on queries because it's just not tagged correctly. I think any enterprise system, they have the same metadata problems. The team inputting it don't necessarily consider all the different usages for it, so they don't create all the right tags.
Also, the BBC's 100 years old, so we've got quite a lot of content.
yeah, there's quite a bit going back there. The Archers goes back to something like 1962, which is like one of our kind of most traditional kind of radio plays, if you ever come across that one.
Question there.
Oh, yes, yeah. So, so we've got a few different ways. There's a few people working in this space now to try and look at how to prototype for this stuff without having to build a fully functioning skill. It's quite an interesting challenge. So like with a website, you have levels of fidelity, you'll do sketches and paper prototypes, then you'll maybe move into other prototyping tools like Balsamic and Exure. Then you'll maybe move into Sketch and InVision, and then you'll maybe even move into HTML and code-based prototypes. So there are like established tools for working in increasing levels of fidelity. For us, nada, nothing. So we tried a few different things. One technique a lady, Hilary Brownlee, who works for the Registers of Scotland, who are essentially the Scottish version of GovUK, of GDS, if you guys have heard of those over there. So I attended a workshop that she ran, which was really cool, where you essentially role play. One person plays the device, one person plays the user, and then another couple of people role play it, being like the moderators and the observers. And you essentially lab test a scenario, but the gotcha is that the device and the user sit back to back, so they can't see each other's body language and facial expressions. And the person who's the device is only allowed to say the stuff that you've pre-scripted. So you do a round of that, identify all the holes in your script, revise the script, try it again with a different person, revise it again to fix more holes. And the thinking is that by about the fourth or fifth sort of time, you started to get a script and a set of responses that are pretty thorough. So that was quite cool. Moving on from that one, we'd be doing a thing where basically creating soundboards. So generating Alexa's responses as WAVs. And then in a lab scenario, we have the device in the room with the user, with the participant. And then we have somebody behind the two-way mirror using Alexa as a Bluetooth speaker, and they're literally just triggering MP3 WAV sort of audio responses to mimic Alexa's response, which is pretty cool. The next one up from that, we have a tool which automates that a little bit more and allows you to do it remotely. We've created a skill which is essentially a wrapper, and it kind of works a bit like a chatbot. So you have a one-to-one pairing between a device and somebody somewhere else with a web client, and they can see a transcript of what the person is saying to Alexa, and they can trigger pre-canned MP3s, or they also have a chat window if they're really quick at typing and want to do a freeform response. That's really cool. It's a little bit hard to manage remotely, but that's quite neat. And then beyond that, you start to have to actually prototype things in code, I think, really. The support the devices. Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so we originally wanted to do our radio podcast proposition that we released December last year for Google as well. However, Google just was slightly lagging behind in terms of UK third-party support. So when we actually looked into it, they don't actually allow you to stream audio, which would be an issue for something that is primarily focused on audio playback to test the market. Also, only US-enabled devices could have third-party skills around the time we started the project. So unfortunately, we couldn't really do that. However, we are looking at a way, currently it's all very much tied to Alexa, but we're looking at how we might pull the interaction out to something else so that all of these other devices communicate kind of platform agnostically to another system that would deal with people's requests. So that's kind of what we're going to be probably looking at this year.
Yeah, just finding the commonalities in the interaction models between the platforms and building something that can work at that level. We haven't had any time to explore the Apple's HomePod yet because that's only just come out, and we're still trying to get the rings off the coffee table. So any more questions? We've kind of got a few notes that we made. So we don't have dedicated teams. So the way our team has formed is essentially we were part of another product. So the BBC internally are split into products with a capital P. So conceptually, like news is a product, sport is a product, iPlayer is a product. We were part of the product called Content Discovery, which it's essentially like an umbrella product. They look after the navigation, the search, and a few other bits and bobs, the homepage. And the Alexa project started off as an actual, just a project, just a work stream within our team. And a few of us who were already in Content Discovery were kind of put on it because we we kind of either had experience in the Node.js, or we were just curious and put our hands in the air. Whilst we were working on the skill that launched just before Christmas, I think while that was happening at a board level, people were kind of becoming awakened to the idea that voice would be a very, very big thing going forward and could be huge. So we've been spun out of our parent product and now we're a new kind of standalone product. So with that, they've brought in the whole team of everything from kind of UX to devs to testers to project and product owners and all that kind of stuff. So they're staffing up big on voice. VR and AR is still at a level where there are a few internal teams playing around with ideas, but more of like an R&D capacity.
Yeah.
Are you aware of BBC R&D? They're like our kind of like stealth labs, black ops sort of team, aren't they? They get to play with some kind of crazy technology and see if it sticks, basically, see if you can do anything meaningful and useful with it. They kind of build half a thing and then throw it over the fence, and poor Emma and her team have to make it production ready. They've been playing with VR and AR, and there are a couple of people specifically, I think, within the organisation who are very, very interested. I think they've got half an eye on what's going to happen with it, but currently nothing formal.
Yeah, I know there's been some research with VR in terms of kind of coping with certain mental disabilities and stuff like that, like speech impediments, depression and stuff like that. That's as much as I'm aware of. But there's some pretty interesting creative stuff where we're trying to see how we might be able to enhance people's lives by that kind of technology. Yeah,
I think R&D teamed up with a couple of universities to do something around the kind of cognitive sort of side of it. I think there might have even been something on TV last week.
Might have been, yeah.
Yeah, so it's nothing kind of production yet. It's still kind of more speculative and R&D. In terms of tools, in terms of learning, gosh. So because it's such a new, certainly Emma may have different view from a more technical kind of perspective, but from a UX and design perspective, for me, it's also new that it's still at the point where it's mainly just like blog posts, Medium posts, tweets, that kind of stuff. There are a couple of books that talk about, there's an O'Reilly book, Designing for Voice, I think. I forget what animal's on the front of it, but it's a fairly standard O'Reilly looking kind of one. That's really good, but that's quite an abstract kind of conceptual sort of designing for voice as a theory. And I think it was written at a time when the platform was even less mature than it is now. So it doesn't really get too technical about stuff. It doesn't really look too much at the gory nuts and bolts about what you can and can't do with Alexa or with Google Assistant.
Yeah, I mean, from a technical perspective, we are actually recruiting at the moment, and being such a thing where it's so early on, it's such an emerging tech, there's not really a huge amount of stuff out there we're looking for when we're recruiting people. A lot of our stuff is written in Node, so Node.js developers, it's an ideal thing, it's one less thing to skill them up on. But the biggest thing is actually an interest in the subject matter is what we actually care about the most, as crazy as that sounds. It's just a pure passion for it and the technical abilities in terms of if you want to become a developer for a voice platform. All of our developers have kind of hacked about with them in advance. So a few of us are actually published on the skill store on our own individual personal accounts, including Barry, who did one as well. And I think that's great. It meant that during our project, Barry understood the technical constraints. So it meant we weren't getting these crazy pie in the sky ideas. He understood the limitations of the platform. So that was really helpful. Yeah, I think that's a big thing for me is just around, like, UX is typically sort of very, very early on in a process. UX can be very divergent in terms of the thinking, and it's quite a skill to bring that back to a convergent, to a single kind of idea. It's particularly important on this platform because there are only certain things that they can do. So having to balance the convergent and the divergent,
divergent with the convergent, so that when you're, when you're kind of workshopping ideas for new stuff, they're still somehow grounded in reality and what the platform can do, but without actually hamstringing the thought process and the design process. It's a very delicate balance. I think we have to make sure that when we've been doing that internally as a team, that we have the right people in the workshops. I'm naturally a convergent thinker, so I try and make sure that we have somebody who is a divergent thinker who can kind of stretch the team to start thinking about bigger ideas before I shoot them down in flames, basically. But yeah, as Emma said, I think having a vague understanding of what you can and can't do is really helpful. So if you kind of, even if it's just a case of working through some of those tutorials to build your first skill, I think is really quite useful. You get even if you're not a developer, you still get a feel for the kind of things that the devs are up against.
And Google, even though it's a different platform, have some great videos that aren't particularly focused at developers about kind of how to deal with conversations, and their recommendations, which are very helpful to look at as well. There's another question.
There is a wide view of voice and UX. Yeah, so I guess for my part, as soon as you strip away all those kind of visual affordances, all the navigation, labels, all the breadcrumbs, all those kind of things that you're used to looking, the headings, all those artifacts on a page that tell you where you are and where to go next. It's quite difficult to work out A, where you are, and B, what else is available. The complaints of a hamburger menu, the things that are always leveled at hamburger menus about how it hides the range of content available, kind of damages exploration, visibility of stuff. Like voice, basically. Imagine putting things in a hamburger and then removing the hamburger. Voice kind of does that. So, for example, we have, oh gosh, as I'm sure you can imagine, on the skills store, we've got some fairly interesting feedback from our lovely general public. And somewhere amongst that, there's some really useful and interesting stuff, and some polite stuff, believe it or not. And there was a couple of people who suggested that, would you consider making a list of all the podcasts available within the skill or in the companion app? And it's kind of, yeah, but we have over, is it 2,000?
So if we include the on-demand stuff that's coming, which is kind of after radio's completed, you can still access that content. It'd be about 5,500 different top-level pieces of information there. Yeah, and that's excluding the episodes and the clips. Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. So it's too much content to list out. That's the biggest issue we get. But I think when it comes to kind of the voice interface in general, I'm quite excited to try and have it remove some of the friction and boundaries that you get when using a device. I'm hoping it will help break down some of those barriers for perhaps tech illiterate people, that kind of thing. You just plonk a device down, you just talk to it. It's such an organic interface. Yeah. As long as we get it right. Yeah.
So I think the worst case scenario is that you end up with a call tree, like when you're trying to phone up like your energy provider, or you're trying to book a cinema ticket, and it's kind of say 1 for this, say 2 for that. If that's what your skill is, then you've absolutely failed. But then how you do something other than that is a really interesting challenge. So to a certain extent, we had it a little bit easy with our MVP, the kind of skill that's out there at the moment, because we are radio and podcasts. And the listening patterns of radio and podcasts, people tend to listen to the same 1 or 2 radio stations, so they know the name. And similarly with podcasts, people tend to listen to the same podcasts over and over, so they know the names of those. So the content discovery side of it isn't so much of an issue for that. There's more we could do. So like searching for podcasts by genre. So play me a comedy podcast. We currently don't support that yet. And even date-based stuff. So if you ask for an episode of The Archers, then by default we'll play the most recent one. But when you're in the most recent one, you can say next and previous to kind of move backwards and forwards through the archive. What we'd really like to be able to do is to start asking for specific date-based episodes. So play the archers from the 12th of January, or from yesterday, or from last week. Each one of those scenarios creates a new set of challenges, because the error states around those are slightly different. So if you say yesterday and it wasn't on yesterday, that's one kind of journey we need to handle. If you say yesterday but it was on twice yesterday, in the morning and in the evening, which one do you want? If you say the 12th of February, but it wasn't on the 12th, but it was on the 11th and the 13th, kind of what do we do there? So they were quite big challenges around date. There was some technical stuff as well around how Amazon was giving us dates.
Yep.
That meant that didn't really get into the MVP.
No, it interprets dates as purely in the future because it's more built for scheduling. So like, on the 12th of October, tell me to do this, but I want to play something from, say, the 12th of October last year. There's no nice way of hooking into that at the moment, at least not with the time we had for our Christmas kind of release.
Yeah, I think we very quickly hit up against the buffers and the boundaries of what the platform is designed for. And I think when you start looking at dates and things like that, you realize that it was designed to do two things, particularly Alexa. It was designed to sell you stuff from Amazon's catalog, and it was designed to create reminders and appointments and scheduling. So yeah, it's all in the future, as you said. So, do we have one in our homes? I think we've all got at least one, haven't we?
I think most people do, mostly because we did the promotion. If we published a skill, we got free Echo Dots, so we all went for that. So we all got free Echo Dots that way. I believe you've got 3, Barry, haven't you? Have you got
I've got 2. I've got 2 dots.
2.
Yeah. I don't tend to use them for content consumption. I tend to use them as the smart home stuff. It's so lazy, but I have a couple of lights with switches in hard to reach positions. So just being able to ask Alexa to turn on the backlight or the sofa lamp, and then being able to create scenes is quite nice. So you can kind of put that light, and that thermostat into a group, and then give that a profile. So if you can turn on evening, and then the lights come on and the temperature goes up 2 degrees, or you can say turn on bedtime and the lights go off and the temperature drops down to kind of something more nighttime appropriate. That's quite a nice kind of automated thing for me. But I tend not to listen to stuff through it, mainly because I've only got the cheap dot, whereas I've got a really nice hi-fi. So don't know what kind of things do you use yours for?
Honestly, I don't actually use mine that much at home, purely because I've been moving house a lot lately. I've been out of the house. I've not really had a chance to sit there and actually use it. I know one of our co-workers actually uses it for traffic information every morning. So basically it's set up for a location where work is, and it'll warn her when the traffic's terrible, which it is every day. So, that's good news.
Don't need to keep asking.
Validated. Looks like there's going to be questions.
Yeah, just as a quick note on the selling thing. So one of the things that made our marketing and audience team very nervous very early on was there was quite a big piece of research around how Alexa was recommending certain things. So if you repeatedly bought batteries or light bulbs or something other kind of disposable and consumery like that, if you asked Alexa for it by default, it would get you Amazon's own brand version and automatically put you that in the cart. It wouldn't even say we've got like X number of different versions. It would always give you Amazon's, and that level of kind of, it basically means that from a search perspective, if you're not first, you're just not there. Now that kind of made some of our people very nervous, because how do you become first on a platform that somebody else owns with their own agenda?
Yeah, I think they just set it up in a minute. Big lights are on.
So our main use cases that we're designing for, so all the research that we've seen and then all the anecdotal stuff that we've found through speaking to users, it's very much a living room or a kitchen device. And that kind of tallies with what Amazon would try and have you believe as well. Now, whether that's a case of people put it in the kitchen because Amazon show you pictures of it in the kitchen, whether it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I'm not sure. So our primary use case is essentially at home. We tend to, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, and I guess the nature of the skill that we've produced so far, because it's primarily listening, kind of like audio feeds, we presumed that there's a certain sort of background backdrop and setting that people use that in, whether it's like in a quiet home or where they've got some time to themselves. There's other stuff that we could do with our content, so food recipes and things like that, that obviously would be used in the same room, like in the kitchen, but in a very different context. So the team that look after the food website are doing loads of research into how to make a good Alexa cooking experience, because it's not easy. If you've ever tried any of the existing skills for recipes, it's really difficult to cook along with. Yeah.
We are doing.
Yeah, we have been doing, yeah. We are naturally in different products, but because of the way voice is set up, we're essentially, we've kind of become gatekeepers, I guess, for the Alexa the platform, and then going forward the other ones. So we work with them to help them design their experience, and then in Food's case they don't have the development resource available or their experience, so I think we will be building that.
Right, I don't know who actually will be building it, but
right.
well, we don't know yet. It's still early discussions, really. There's quite a lot of there's a lot of departments at the BBC, as Barry said. There's like, you know, probably like 30 plus different kind of concept ideas. There's weather, news, sport, and etc. So trying to ensure we get a consistent experience is why it should all go through this team, at least in terms of assisting them. Yeah. But whether the development team has enough capacity to deal with everyone's demand, you want to get there while it's a hot technology. You don't want to be there 2 years later, so they can't always wait for us. But yeah, we're always trying to basically help them out, share our learnings. We've got good relationships we've built with Amazon now. That was something we had to develop during the development of this thing, because we did something no other skill has done before that's third party. We took a top level intent, and by that I mean, Alexa, play Radio 1. There's no invocation name. Normally there's an invocation name, like your skill name, whatever it's called, like Expedia, open Expedia. You don't have to do that. You should go play Radio 1 and it goes straight to us. That's something that they're not going to be doing for everyone. Yeah, they were, because of the commercial agreements, and we were essentially replacing TuneIn as the default radio provider for our radio content. They were aware that when they launched with TuneIn, they'd done a lot of kind of like really manual kind of blue tack, sticky tape kind of plumbing underneath to make all that stuff work seamlessly. As soon as they realized that half of those like hardwired intents had to be rerouted to us, I think they got a little bit scared about like, what mess have we created, and how can we make that mess more scalable in the future? Yeah, I think there's an interesting piece while you're getting your other question, sorry, where with the release of stuff like the show and the spot, it becomes a more multimodal experience, and so that's something that still hasn't been looked into much, but it's being explored. Yeah. All the original guidelines when the show came out was that, you know, any companion screen should be used as essentially nice to have information. You should never rely on the screen being part of the core experience, because even if you have a show in your kitchen, you might not be able to see the screen, because obviously the mics are so good that you can use it from kind of across the house. So we haven't explored too much what doing it on a show would mean for radio, let alone for food.
No, what do you think?
How to vision the ultimate voice UI experience? It's a big question. I think that I think one of the things that we personally are trying to look for with our experience is something which is personal to each person. Like what does the voice interface mean to the individual? Personalization is a big component in the BBC. I know you guys probably don't follow what Tony Hall's speeches are all about when they're on our news stations. I'm sure that doesn't interest you guys at all, but that's kind of the big push the BBC is doing. How can we personalize the experience to each person? And so that's probably one of the most important things I think we'll want from a voice interface ourselves.
Yeah, just the whole thing around it can tell whether it's me talking or whether it's Emma talking, and if you were to say add something to your calendar, it would add it to your calendar, and likewise.
Yeah.
I could add something to my calendar.
It's even based on where you are, what you're doing. Is it morning? Is it evening? What kind of device are you on? Do you have multiple devices? Is there multiple people in your household? Kind of getting that kind of insight to people without it being creepy.
yeah, that's the fix. And I think, to be honest, I think sci-fi does a lot of that for us. Kind of cinema and TV set a lot of expectation, and it's always been that technology. The people who create the technology tend to be big sci-fi fans anyway, so they've always got one eye on what cinema and sort of what TV's doing. And actually, it's like, oh, I like that. Let's try and build one of those. And you end up kind of chasing Hollywood to a certain extent.
Other channels.
Not licensed, so it's a little bit complicated the way the license thing's set up. We don't hold license fee payers information. We do have a login and this concept of like a BBC user account on the website, which we can use for personalization, but it's not connected to license fee. No. We don't use it at the moment.
No, not at the moment. It's something we're looking into. It's again something, because we take that top level intent with Amazon, that Play Radio one. We've got to be quite careful how we interject that kind of thing in the experience without it causing customers grief, especially on Amazon side as well, because they'll see it as just Amazon. So it's making sure they don't make the customers unhappy.
Yeah. So like our skill launched just before Christmas. One of the big kind of commercial imperatives to get the radio and podcast skill live was before Christmas, because Amazon were fairly sure they would sell like a whole heap of devices over that period.
Black Friday in particular, they were predicting a massive upsell, and especially for the UK. I think, is it 1 in 6 households had one at some time this year? Yeah.
So they were very mindful that they would be switching. So for existing users, they would be rerouting the tuning experience to our skill. For new users who are unboxing, they would be turning it on and asking for Radio 2. And if the first thing they got was, please log into your BBC account, that wouldn't be such a great experience. And that would reflect badly on us, but also on Amazon.
Yeah.
So we shied away from any form of login and personalization for day one. We're looking to introduce login as an optional component, so that if you are logged in, we can start doing extra personalization. But the team who look after login have to do a big chunk of work to be able to support that for us. And in the meantime, we've been focusing on kind of other stuff, shoring up some of the edge cases around podcasts and radio stuff, some of the quirks that have come out of that in Wash. And also looking at some stuff for children's now as well.
Yeah, in terms of personalised content on other mediums rather than voice, again, I don't know if there's much use of, there's probably no one really uses iPlayer in the States, but essentially iPlayer does have recommendations. You can favourite things, watch it later, that kind of thing. So
so the channels that we've got that do audio and video have login integration. So theoretically, we have a user base who've used our audio visual services and have accrued history of activity. They've created favorites. So if we switch this on and those people then logged in on this platform as well, we do have a history of interactions to choose from. Whether that's, we see that you listen to the Archers, so we've got the next Archers ready for you, or that kind of thing. I always use the Archers, apologies.
Do you guys even know what the Archers is? Probably not. It's a really
Give it a
rubbish
whirl.
radio drama.
Give it a whirl.
It's fascinating. It's terrible.
Achingly British. It's set in rural England or in a farming village.
Canapé parties are sometimes the highlight of the episode, just to put it into context of how interesting it is.
Yeah, there's so much tweed and plaid. It's achingly British.
Quintessentially British for sure, yes.
Painfully. Ooh, gosh. Damn you.
Nice.
Damn you.
I like it.
I suppose there's a few different things there. You've got a trust perception around the platform generally. The whole "I won't have one in my bedroom because it's always listening" sort of argument, and we are possibly implicated in that just by virtue of being on that platform. In terms of using our services, I don't know. Have you got?
So when it comes to the technical side of things, we have a very rigorous InfoSec process, which is where we document everything we've done technically, every service we've used, every API I've integrated with, and we present it to a team of very specialist people that essentially put every hole imaginable in it. Because obviously the last thing you want is to start leaking personal information, especially when you are trusting a third party such as Amazon to handle even stuff like your login tokens for a platform that is otherwise been something we have full control over. So it's kind of how do we deal with that? And I think we've done quite a good job. There's also, we have the BBC in general has its trust is pretty much on the back of the lanyard, I think. Let me just check. I'm pretty sure trust, there you go. Trust is the foundation of the BBC. So that's actually the top point of the lanyard. And honestly, it is something that we take into every product, not just voice. So that strategy is probably above our grade.
Oh my God, yes.
I think it's making sure that, I guess from your perspective, that people get what they're asking for, like the information, the way you architect that information is probably very important. Yeah,
very much so. So one, a war story, I guess war stories are always good. So architecturally, the way the radio stuff works is kind of, you ask Alexa for a radio station. Alexa's speech to text thing will turn that into like an alphanumeric kind of string of letters. And then it will do some NLP analysis on that to try and work out what you actually meant by those words. And then it will give those things to us. And we basically strip the radio station, for example, Radio 2 out of what you asked for, go away, get the URL for the Radio 2 feed, and then pass that back to the device. At no point do we know where that device is located. It could be on my desk, it could be in Cuba, it could be on the moon. We have no concept of that. Unfortunately, our content, the feed, all our feeds are quite locked down. So we were given specific feeds to use for this platform. And it's like the iOS apps use a different URL for their platform. So it's all, the guys who look after that is so they can manage it and trace it. The radio feeds that we were passing back out were geofenced to the UK because of license fee kind of complications. So what that meant was, if you had a UK registered Alexa device in your holiday home in Spain, and you asked for the radio station, we said, playing Radio 2, and then nothing. Behind the scenes, the stream was returning a 404 or a forbidden.
It was a forbidden, forbidden code.
Yeah, 400 or something. So there was just silence. So there were a lot of feedback, a lot of reviews on the skill store around kind of, I just get silence. And if you do a little probing, it's because the device is outside the UK. So having to communicate that to people that it's not broken, it's just that you're not in the UK. And then also having to justify why it's ring fenced to the UK was quite difficult. and to the point where it became such an issue that we actually went to our legal team to get the for permission to have the geofencing lifted. So I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that was removed. So theoretically, you can now listen to the stuff wherever you are. You're welcome. So that was one particular kind of thing where the trust was quite visibly broken. And if you look at the skill store reviews, there's a lot of fairly angry people saying that. Angry or confused, in fairness, because they didn't always realise why.
No, I think the fact that the silence happened, so we said we were going to play something and it didn't, and that is because we actually have no control after we send that. So Barry said we send a stream back for the radio station. After that, we have no control over what's going on. So essentially, we're revoking quite a lot of control we have with the user here, and that is difficult to maintain that trust with them if we sometimes aren't in control of what's happening. That's kind of a big challenge. Yeah, and then I think Amazon's the model that they have for Alexa, this kind of concierge kind of pattern where you never speak to the BBC, you speak through Alexa. So you ask Alexa to get you an Uber, or to get you a Domino's, or to get you a radio station, and Alexa gets that for you and then tells you here it is, and then it happens. It really blurs the boundaries between whose fault it is when something breaks. Sometimes you can use that in your favor and just go, it's Alexa's problem. Other times you get problems attributed to your thing when it's actually not your thing that's broken. But it's, as with any technology, it's, if you're not technologically minded, it's hard to work out quite what's going on and why there's a problem. Most of these students have never heard of the Sisters of Mercy. Oh my stars, Dan. I haven't either.
Get out.
I need to go anyway, to be honest. I need to go home.
What song? Oh gosh, it would probably have to be Lucretia, maybe, just for that bass line, you know?
Yeah.
It's a fair cop.